Welcome to the One Gang Worldwide podcast, your ultimate ride into the world of motorcycles. Visit cyclesworldwide.com where we offer a completely free marketplace for everything motorcycles. Join our One Gang community where you can connect, share info, and swap stories with riders from all over the world. Join for free at cyclesworldwide.com and be a part of the One Gang community right now.
On today's episode of the One Gang Worldwide podcast, we're catching up with Tony Prust, the extremely talented builder and mastermind behind Analog Motorcycles. Tony's celebrated for his exceptional ability to transform vintage machines into modern classics, blending timeless aesthetics with contemporary performance. In today's episode, Tony will go into his background and how he got into building, his fascinating build philosophy, share insights into the challenges of custom bike building, and discuss the evolving landscape of motorcycle design. So let's get into gear and explore the artistry of motorcycle customization with Tony Prust, right here on the One Gang podcast.
Try to make, if it doesn't need to be there, it's coming off. And if it needs to be there, I'm going to try to make it so it's not that visible, or that it kind of flows with the design of the bike so that the end product looks simple. It almost looks like it can't be ridden. It has everything that it needs, but it's not bulky. So I think that's analog. Like, I think that's just a simpler version of design is my philosophy.
One Gang Worldwide podcast, brought to you by Keyboard Motorcycle Shipping. Since 1978, Keyboard Motorcycle Shipping has been the trusted name in transporting motorcycles safely across the country. With custom designed pallets and air ride trailers, your bike is secure and protected every step of the way. By choosing Keyboard Motorcycle Shipping, you're supporting a dedicated small business that prioritizes quality and customer satisfaction. Ship with a peace of mind, knowing your motorcycle is in expert hands.
Please visit shippingmymotorcycle.com. That's shippingmymotorcycle.com. And now, back to our show.
We've got Tony Prust of Analog Motorcycles, a real talented guy, and we're pumped to get to know him a little better. So welcome to the show, Tony. We're happy to have you.
Thank you. You're happy to be here.
What's up, Tone, man? Glad to have you. This guy's one of my favorite builders for sure. I guess the way we'll kick this thing off is tell us a little bit about where you grew up, what was your childhood, all experiences, and how it shaped your passion for motorcycles.
So I grew up in southern Wisconsin, and I didn't really have a family. My immediate family wasn't really into motorcycles so much. My dad ended up getting a motorcycle later on. I was probably in high school, I think, when he finally got a motorcycle. But while I was also in high school, you could get a scooter on a permit. So if I had just your driving permit, you could ride a scooter. So I bought a Honda Spree, saved up all my money from all my jobs of working at wherever I could, got a Honda Spree, and I was like the only dude rolling into high school on a scooter. But that was my first two-wheel sort of experience. Didn't love it. Tried doing wheelies on it all the time just because, I was into bicycles and skateboards. So wheelies seems to be the next thing you do on a two-wheel anything. But then I got married in 92 at the ripe young age of 19. Wow. And I immediately bought a motorcycle because my parents actually wouldn't let me buy a motorcycle. So they let me have the scooter, but they would not let me buy a motorcycle. So I got a 90 Suzuki Katana 600. That was my first street motorcycle. Prior to that, one of my uncles, he was into dirt bikes. So I learned to ride and shift on a Fat Cat on a dirt bike. So the big wide tire, he goes, Yamaha made that one. And he had a CR 500, offered to let me try that. I was like, heck no, like that's the Widowmaker, man. But that's basically how I started in the two-wheel journey. And after I had one street bike, it just never stopped. So that was essentially my journey from scooter to cheap sport bike to here I am today.
Right on. So fill us the gaps in for the time between you're married in 92, you're working, I imagine. It wasn't until 2008 that you started Analog Motorcycles. What led to that?
Oh, my motto my whole life has been custom is for Walmart shelves or sockets for Walmart shelves. So everything that I've ever owned, I've customized from a car to a skateboard, bicycle, motorcycle, you name it. I did something to it that changed it from stuff. And I think I started track riding pretty heavily in probably early 2000s or mid 2000s. And I'm trying to remember how that transition happened. I ended up not going. So sport bikes to me were what I owned until I started track riding for the street. Once I started track riding on the track, I'm like, oh, this is where sport bikes are supposed to be. So I ended up getting a Ducati Monster, which is more geared for road riding than a sport bike. Like I see guys on these super high horsepower sport bikes on the road. I'm like, you should really go to the track. It's so much more fun. And so I got a Monster. It had some custom work done to it. I did a little bit more, and then I upgraded from that was like a 750 to a Monster S2R 1000. And that one, like I took it all apart, powder coated a whole bunch of things, put it back together, tailored like headlight bracket and some see-through belt covers, like just stuff I was doing in the shop or in my garage just for fun.
Right.
And I would post the pictures of what I was doing on like monster.org, or I forgot what the website was back then. It was a forum. And all of a sudden people are like, could you make those for me? Or could you send me brackets on so I can lower my headlight? I'm like, really? Like, you guys want to do same things that I'm doing? So I ended up like kind of side business, selling a couple parts here and there on the forums. And while that was all going on, that was in like 06, 07, the whole cafe racer thing started to really kick up around then. And I picked up a piece of garbage CV750, and I'm like, I'm going to go above and beyond what I did on the Monster. Like I'm going to go crazy as far as I can with the ability I had at the time. Had a buddy of mine that could weld, and he basically helped me start that project. And while I was doing it, I'm like, since I sold some parts on the Monster, I thought, well, maybe this thing might take off. So I branded the bike. I came up with a name. I talked to my buddy that was a graphics art guy, and he came up with a logo for the name. I'm like, I'm gonna put this on the bike and see what happens. And that was
Just analog.
yeah. And that was in 2000. Then we came up with the logo. We put it on that bike that I finished in 08. And that's here we are.
Hey, Tone, let me ask you a question. When did you start Did you grow up wrenching a little bit? Was that something that was taught to you by maybe dad or somebody in the family? How'd you start kind of messing around with this stuff? Or were you always mechanically inclined as you were growing up?
I think it's definitely a bit of a gifting.
Nice.
My dad, we were broke, so my dad always worked on our cars because we drove old cars with lots of miles that needed repair. So he was always wrenching, but I don't know that he really ever divulged the info to me. Like it was more like, hold this, hold the light, don't drop the thing. Like it was more of a helper than I'm going to teach you how to do this. Like it was, and I just kind of learned by watching. And then I also
free labor.
Yeah. And then I also learned a lot I'm a hands-on guy. So I want to know how something works. I'll take it apart, put it back together, know that if something breaks, I can kind of have an idea of why. So that's just been a gifting of mine, I think, forever. So no one really ever taught me what I know in the beginning. I ended up later on, as business progressed, and I started doing more complex builds that I wasn't able to do all the work on. So I had to farm things out. And
Gotcha.
that ended up coming with, I would say, hindrances. So it's like timing, budget, like you're at the mercy. Like for metal shaping, for instance, a couple of builds that I did, I didn't know what I was doing. So I would design in a foam buck or a wood buck, and I would give it to a metal shaper and say, this is what I want, so they didn't have a question of what I want. But then you're dealing, like, how much do you think it'll cost? And now that I metal shape, I know that's like really difficult to put a price tag on, but I'm trying to budget for a build that is for a customer, and I can't come to him later and say, well, that guy doubled his price. So, that's just, I was seeing some of that. I'm like, I need to learn how to do this. So I took a few years and stopped farming it out and started doing it myself. And I had one mentor. I actually did a couple metal shaping classes, and one of them was not that great. I won't say the name, but it was basically, I went there and it was more for car guys, but you learn how to do all the metal shaping process on his thousands of dollars of machinery. I'm like, well, I'm not going to buy all this. Like, some of these are
Right.
unobtainium. Like, I can't afford to even find one. And so I'm like, that wasn't very helpful. At the end of that class, I actually asked him, I was like, can you show me how to make something on just this tool that I have and that tool that I have? Make a fender.
Right.
And he
Right,
struggled. He did it, but he struggled to kind of show me how to do it. I'm like, see, this was not that helpful. Then I went to another class, which was helpful. But then I ended up getting this guy that I know in Illinois. He passed away, it was hard for me because he was like, he plugged into people. He was retired, super smart guy. His name was Devlin Hunt. And he came to the shop like once a week for about 3 months. And he would never touch the metal. Like, he would tell me, this is what you do. This is what you do. Hand it to me. Like, I'll do it. Like, he wouldn't, and it was like, and I had to do it on my own. And he had minimal tools. Like, he was the same as me. He just had like hand tools and a Harbor Freight English wheel. And that was it. He didn't even have a finishing hammer. And I had a finishing hammer at that time. So I was like, it was great. And ever since, I kind of put my head around it a little bit more than I had. So to answer the whole question longer, it's just over time, welding's the same way. Like, I bought a welder, started teaching myself. I went to school to try to get into a class, and I ended up having to drop out because I was touring with a band at the time, and I couldn't make all the classes because they kept scheduling more shows. So I was like, well, I had to drop out of that class. So I just bought a welder, taught myself how to weld, asked a few people some questions. Devlin Hunt, he helped me on that one too. When it came to aluminum, he taught me how to, really weld aluminum. So it's just been a lot of trial and error. And I usually wouldn't ever do anything for a customer bike unless I did it on something that I was riding first.
Right.
So like, I would test out, if I built an exhaust, I'd build an exhaust on a bike I own and go out there and rail on it and see if it broke. And if it didn't break, I was like, all right, well, I guess I know what I'm doing. Same with the tanks, like, I wouldn't make an aluminum tank and put it on a bike unless I rode that bike for a while to see if what I'm doing is strong enough to withstand, normal abuse.
Right.
And, now it's to the point where I have a tank that I made on a race bike, and it holds up fine, and body work that I have on a race bike that I've crashed a few times, and I can just pop it back into place. And so that's been my journey.
Gotcha. Hey, before we get to the next question, I did want to ask you, growing up in Wisconsin, right? How did you go to the Japanese bikes and the Italian bikes and all the foreign bikes over the Harley bikes? It's a question I'm gonna ask because I mean, the home birth of the American legend. So I'm curious about that before I ask you the next thing.
Yeah, my dad is from Milwaukee. He grew up in Milwaukee, just down the street from where they're at now. He lived right by the Bradley clock. So, and all of my uncles were Harley guys. So my dad didn't own a bike. He ended up buying a Yamaha when I was in high school. That was his first bike. And he ended up crashing it and selling it and never getting on a bike until I built him a bike later on in the analog business. And then he ended up buying a Road King. So he's also a Harley guy. But growing up and seeing the Harley guys and seeing the, that whole culture and lifestyle, and it was so saturated in that area that I'm like, if I try, I would just be white noise. Like, everybody's a Harley guy in this area. So I'm going to try to niche out my own little market, something that's not Harley. And it worked.
So Plus, I'm sure you like the speed a little bit more on those bikes
I mean, I
compared
definitely,
to the dogs they used to build back in the day.
definitely appreciate modern technology and not overpriced old technology.
Absolutely. Hey man, let me ask you this: how do you approach your design, and like what principles guide you to build? What's your balance between, like, how do you balance between a complexity and simplicity in your builds? So when you look at something that you're going to put out there, how do you get into take us into your process of, okay, this is my vision, this is where I'm going with this.
So the name analog has a few sort of meanings to me. My daughter's name is Anna, spelled A-N-A, so that was part of it. I was an audio engineer and was in the audio field for several years, so that was part of it. I DJ'd records, actual vinyl records, for a number of
Nice.
years, and to me, analog is the simpler version of audio. So digital recording was high on, coming into what I was doing at the time.
Right.
And analog is just simple. Like, you can't, when you start rolling a tape, you're going to record whatever it is. And if you suck at it, you got to go back and re-record that thing. Whereas in the digital world, you could make 100 mistakes and some dude on a computer can go in there and
Fix
tweak
it,
every
yeah.
one of those mistakes. And so it sounds perfect. And modern music is obviously a representation of that. Pop music is so overly done and overly produced that you don't get the nuances of live, simple analog. And so I take that sort of theology into my design. I try to make, if it doesn't need to be there, it's coming off. And if it needs to be there, I'm going to try to make it so it's not that visible, or that it kind of flows with the design of the bike so that the end product looks simple. It almost looks like it can't be ridden. It has everything that it needs, but it's not bulky. So I think that's analog. Like, I think that's just a simpler version of design is my philosophy.
Gotcha. Thank you.
You mentioned audio engineering, and you were also into carpentry as well. Those past experiences and jobs and hobbies that you had, how did they come in and take a part of the approach?
So I was a carpenter for several years. And the reason I started analog actually was because the carpentry business in the mid 2000s started to kind of dry up. So I had my own business. I worked for a contractor for a while. Things were starting to get, he was starting to struggle. I was doing mostly high-end trim work on the North Shore, staircases built in, like, intricate things with wood that a lot of people can't do. And once the market started to change and the shift and the whole problem that we had with all that back in, 04, 05, 06, I started doing bathroom remodels and basement remodels, and just that I hated. Like, I just hated going to work. I hated the jobs. Wasn't challenging. And I switched and started messing more with motorcycles. But, whatever the medium is, I just like to work with my hands. I like to make things out of nothing. And the ability to do that is a gift. Like, I know that it's a gift. I'm appreciative that I have those gifts. I'm also appreciative that, I have a bad ear now and a bad back and a bad shoulder, and I can still do all the things that I love to do. Like, I just keep pushing forward. But I think that it all ties together. Like, I never put, to my knowledge, I don't think I've ever did like any wood on a motorcycle. I've seen it done and I've thought about doing it, but it's like, I like the two separate for some reason. So I kind of, I keep them separate, but
Agreed.
I do like to still work with wood. I still do, a lot of home remodels and stuff in our own home, and still blow my wife away, when I do something that she loves. But at the same time, I like to work with metal too.
That's right. Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. Hey, your builds have been featured in magazines, on television. Share some highlights, memorable moments from the things you've done that were recognized, and which awards, accolades are you most proud of? I mean, you've built some beautiful machines, man. And anybody who hasn't seen it, they will check out his website. You guys can see the man's a genius with his hands. So as he's saying, but take us into a little bit about the stuff that you've done that you were really proud of, and in addition to what's one or two things that really stand out in your life that you've done that you've been recognized for?
I think Cycle World feature, been in there twice as a featured builder, or a featured bike, and are pretty standout moments for me. Cycle World was, growing up, that was the magazine for me. Like I know print magazines are pretty much gone these days, but I think being able to get into that for the first time with the Bimota DV 3.5 that we built, and then the second time with the Moto 3, the little Ducati that I did all the metal work on, like I think that was a crowning achievement for sure. And then 2 quail wins were also high on my list. We took the Indian International Scout out to the quail in, I think it was 15 maybe. And first time I'd ever been there, drove across the country from Illinois to California. I had no idea what to expect. Like I just knew it was a concourse, high level, all the, fancy folks are out there and all the dollars are out there. So I'm like, I'm gonna go out there and just put this bike on the lawn and see what it does. And it won Best Custom Modified that year. And I was like,
Nice.
it was amazing. So 2 years later, I finished the Moto 3 and went back out there and won Design and Style Award, which is probably my favorite trophy. It's a Arch, the brand, or, Keanu Reeves, and
Yeah.
that
Arch motorcycles. Yep.
they CNC'd this trophy. It's like a tail section of their bike, but it's this giant CNC billet piece of aluminum. That was a trophy for the Design and Style Award. And I was like, that was amazing too. So I think those definitely were highlights. And then Cafe Racer TV, when it was out, when we were on there, that was not so much the being on TV in the build process, but having Eric and Ben Bostrom come ride our bike at a track. That was amazing.
That's when I first found out who you were, was through that show. And then after that, I kind of started following your work, man. So that's cool as hell.
Hey guys, the show will be back in 1 minute right after a word from our sponsor.
Hey, One Gang, tired of feeling like your butt's taking more of a beating than your bike on those long rides? Introducing Butt Buffer, the ultimate solution to saddle soreness. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. These cushions are made from medical-grade viscoelastic polymer, scientifically crafted to eliminate pressure points and keep your circulation flowing. No more numb nuts or numb butts. And here's the best part. Butt Buffer cushions are made right here in the U.S. for the last 30 years. From Harleys to Hondas, we've got a cushion to fit your ride perfectly. Plus, with styles ranging from sleek pebble polymer to luxurious sheepskin, there's a Butt Buffer for every rider's style. Get your Butt Buffer today at buttbuffer.com. That's buttbuffer.com. Your butt will thank you, and you'll ride longer and happier. We've got your butt covered.
As far as Cycle World, when you hit Cycle World and you had a couple of listings on a couple of showcases of your motorcycles, did you get a lot of build calls for builds for other customers? Is that something that really kind of helped you take off?
Honestly, no. I think what it ends up doing more than anything is it just kind of validates the brand. It's a weird industry, and I think I'm in a weird niche sort of market where my customers come to me, and sometimes I don't even understand how they found me.
Do you ask?
Sometimes, and sometimes I just know or have a feeling that I would say I've probably gotten more of my customer base from Bike Exit. I think that being featured on there as much as we have, and the positive comments that we've gotten over the years from most of our builds, I think
Right.
that is where some of our clientele come from. We invested a lot in social media when it, I hired a guy right out of the gate, and that's how we have such a huge following. Like, we were on top of it as soon as social media was a thing. But I found that several of my customers that bought high dollar motorcycles or had me build high dollar motorcycles, they don't even have social media accounts. Like, it's not that demographic is, they're too busy working and making money. It's how I view it,
Right,
or
right, right,
spending their
right.
Yeah.
money, that they're not on social media. Like, they could care less, like it's
That's
so,
right.
I mean, I sold that Continental Scout at a local Ferrari dealership that a buddy of mine was good friends with the owner. He's like, "We're having our open house. You want to bring a couple bikes to display?" And I was like, "Sure." Like, I mean, no idea what to expect. And I had
Nice.
the Indian at the time, and I didn't put either one of the bikes that I put out there for sale. Like, I just sat them out there, and I dropped it off the night before the open house. And so did a Pagani Huayra owner who also owned a Ferrari, or LaFerrari.
Nice.
He showed up, and I got asked the next day when I showed up, he was like, "You want to sell that bike?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "What's your price?" And I told him. He's like, "All right, I'll let you know." I was like, "All right." I call the next day. He wants to buy. Like, no haggling, no, like, it
Right,
was
right, right.
just, and he bought it, never took it out of that dealership. It sat there on display in that dealership. And then I heard later, like 2 years later, it's still sitting at that dealership, I think. So
Wow.
I don't know. It's a different type of customer. Like, they appreciate the work. They appreciate the art. They want to look at it. They want to say they own it.
Piece of art.
Yeah. It's, I mean, cool. I'm down, but I prefer, everything I make, I ride. Like, I don't put out art bikes. Like, I ride them, make sure they function. Would I want to ride that
Of
Indian
course.
every day? Heck no. Like, that thing vibrates like crazy.
Hmm.
So I know I wouldn't recommend it, and glad that he did. And glad that it's sitting on display because it's still beautiful and not beat up. But
That's right.
so,
That's cool. So, tell us about Rebels Uncaged and the Dirty Twin that you got into with that Triumph. What inspired that, and can you take us into the build a little bit?
so that was the second year they did the Rebels Uncaged thing. And the first year, it was funny. The first year they gave us this book of color scheme, like they did the whole brand thing. So it was, Rebel Bourbon was their brand, and they were marketing the brand and wanted the bikes to kind of represent the brand. So it was funny that first year, all of the builders showed up with like a basically similar color scheme. It was all raw metal, blacks and gold, like browns. It was all very
Yeah.
organic color schemes. And they all look, I mean, they didn't look the same, but essentially, if you just glanced at them, nothing was standing out. And so the second year they called up and they wanted to do it again. And knowing that we were going from the first year was St. Louis to Sturgis. The second year was from Spokane to Sturgis. And I'm like, we're going through mountains. Like, I want to try some off-road trails maybe. And Triumph at the time was releasing their Street Scrambler, I think, that year. And I asked if I could get a Street Twin and turn it into a Street Scrambler before they released it. So they gave me a good deal on the bike, and I basically built what I would want to ride on that ride. And
Right.
they were giving them away a little bit differently at the end, where people kind of had to earn them. And then the guy that won the Dirty Twin, I mean, that guy, he was a photographer. He sent pictures for years. He still beats the crap out of that bike and rides it all the time. And
That's great.
that's an answer, that I want. Like, that's the guy that I want to own that bike. So
That's cool.
So you did those rides then, right? You went from Spokane and then also the other one, right? And the
yeah.
bike performed well. You enjoyed it?
Yeah, the first year I snapped my clutch cable. Halfway through the ride, we found a local welding shop that we fixed it. But that was the only The only issue I had on either one of those rides was just that clutch cable. The second year, there was an old Harley on that. I think it was maybe a panhead or something. That thing, it had problems the whole time. But anyways,
Yeah.
it was fun. The marketing guy at the time, the first year was rough. Like, they didn't really know what they were doing as far as logistics and stuff. And so, like, I ended up supplying the two vans and a trailer in case there were breakdowns and that sort of thing.
Right.
The next year they had it figured out. They had box trucks and staff, and like, all we had to do was show up at the hotel, give them our bike, and we would, go have a drink or eat or whatever, and wake up the next morning. It's clean, ready to go on the next day. It's like, I'll keep this going every year.
Right.
That's
But
cool.
the business ended
Yeah,
up
for
going a
sure,
little
for
bit
sure.
different direction. They went audio for a while, but I still stay in contact with the marketing guy, and he's like, I'd love to do it again, but I don't think it's going to happen.
Going back into the business side as a small business owner, how do you navigate in regards to your creative side, which is the custom building side, and managing also, because I'm sure you probably do service repair in addition to kind of keep a balance and have that income coming in. What advice would you give inspiring young builders who are listening to this and kind of want to turn their passion into a successful business or future? What would you recommend for guys maybe looking into this and listening to you and that are inspired by builds? What kind of advice would you give them? Maybe that would have been great for you to hear when you were a young lad coming up and going into this industry.
I would say, do you know how to make $4 million in the motorcycle industry? And the answer is, you start with 8.
That's awesome. Dude. That's awesome.
It is
so true too, man.
a tough industry. I don't do service just because I hate it. It's such a thankless gig, and it's, I'm too particular, and I'm like, guy comes in, wants new tires. I'm going to clean his rims. I'm not going to make any money cleaning his rims. Like, I can't charge for that, but
Right.
it's like, it's just what I do. Like, if I'm going to take this wheel off and have it on my wheel stand, I'm going to clean it because it's filthy. Like, that's, so I go to the racetrack now because I race these 2 bikes that I built, and everyone's always coming up the past. The bikes are so clean. I was like, it's not hard. It's not rocket science. Like, a rag and some soap and water, and your race, it could be as clean as mine. It's
no doubt about it.
So that's
man.
why I never got into it. And I also would, if I found something, I would tell them. And, if, your oil, I change your oil and there's some metal in it, you might want to look into that, I know a lot of shops just change the oil, see some metal in it, put the oil back in, send him on his way. And if his bike blows up, it's not my fault. So I ended up going the route of parts. So, back to when I started on, making them little monster things for when I was doing that, I saw that was something that was smaller and attainable for more people. Custom builds is a very small pool of customers. The people that can afford what I charge is not everybody. But everybody can afford a part, and if it's a $500 part or a $20 part, most people can afford one of those parts in that spectrum. So my wife challenged me long ago when I first started the business and when I went full time. And she's like, you have to figure out a way to make money when you're not in the shop. Because again, with service, if I'm not in there doing service, or if I don't have an employee that's in the shop doing service, you're not making money. If I'm not in there banging on metal or customizing something or making a cable or, fabricating a bracket, I'm not making money. If I have parts on a website, I can be sleeping or on vacation and make money. And that's the avenue that I went down. And that is what I would say in advice going down that road is find niche market things and stick with those things. The problem that I had was with our website, we tried to sell our parts, and then we tried to sell more parts than the market really needed. And then we started selling other brands parts, and then we tried apparel, and then we just kept trying to make it so that we could turn into one of those big stores. And that ended up costing me so much money with inventory sitting on the shelves, not moving, if you don't have a marketing plan. And I was going to shows. I mean, we were going to shows once a month for 5 years just to keep the brand awareness going. And we would go to these shows,
Of course.
set up. It would take, a day of travel both ways, the 2 or 3 days of the show, time off work, time setting up, time loading the van, time unloading the van, time doing inventory. It'd be a week's worth of time to do a 2-day show. And
Right.
we wouldn't sell that much at those shows because most of these shows are parties. Like, people would go there and check out bikes. We'd bring a bike, they'd check out bikes, drink beer, and party. They weren't there to buy a $500, $1,000 worth of parts. They were there to party and maybe get a t-shirt. And it was such a struggle that I just started scaling back down on the parts and focusing on the handful that really make me money. And I've stopped most of my expense in marketing, and it's so sustainable now on its own that I just kind of, I let it keep going its course.
Tony, let me ask you a question. Take us into the parts that you are focusing on as far as the stuff that you are selling, the creating. Which parts are you really kind of focused on and you kind of perfected and feel great with them?
So our first big part was the Triumph Thruxton LED tail light. So Tron came out back whenever. Sport Classic was in that bike, and it had a thin little LED strip with turn signals, warning lights. I called the guy that made those for that bike. I had actually dealt with him in a previous build, getting some rims because he was the importer of some rims that we used on the Pomoda. And I called him up, was like, "Hey, that LED strip, are you going to do anything with Thruxtons on there?" He's like, "No, we looked into it. He basically was like, "No, we don't want to do that." I was like, "Do you mind if I do?" He's like, "No, go ahead." I was like, "Can you tell me where you got the LED strip?" He shared that.
Right.
He wanted to sell them to me, but I was like, the markup was too much to make it worth the investment. So I ended up coming up with my garage at my house. I was still working on some builds. I had a Thruxton in house that I was customizing, and I made the LED strip. And I'm like, this is pretty cool. And took it to a guy that I just met who does CNC work. I was like, could we backwards engineer? Because I made it out of metal. Like, I don't have a CNC machine, and the intricacies in order to make that part out of aluminum in a garage was, something I couldn't do. So I ended up having him kind of backwards engineer the part, and got bulk pricing on the LEDs and started making them. I first started making them kind of to order. And then I realized that if I can make them in bulk and they're sitting on the shelf, then when I sell one, I just ship it out. So I, take a day or two, make a bunch, sit them on the shelf. So that was the start of the parts business. And to this day, we still make the best Thruxton, even on the modern, RSs. We still make the best LED taillight setup that anyone has. And the prices have gone up. Everything that I pay for has gone up, and I still sell it at a premium, and it's still one of our best selling parts.
Are you working with Triumph also? Are they also trying to kind of like, do you work with them where they market your product also, or is it strictly through you
No,
guys?
it's strictly through us. I have when I started the parts business, and then the next part that we had that was our big seller was our little analog signal pods. And that came from, we were getting a similar product from a guy who was making them in his garage. And he's like, "I don't want to do this anymore." And I was like, "Well, is it all right if I do this?" And he was fine with it. So I just did a new one and had it manufactured in bulk. And that's our current best selling part, is the little signal pods, and they bolt right on, and they fit a bunch of Triumph models. But plug and play is the key. Like, that's where you definitely sell a part a lot quicker if a customer can, because they get gratification from buying the part, going into the garage, touching some tools, and being able to do it themselves and go to their bike night and say, "I installed that." Like, I hit it.
Right. Without the fear of connectors and
Yep.
and
And I
soldering
get it,
and all
because
that stuff.
I
Of
feel
course,
that
man.
same way about the projects I do. It's just mine are more complex. Like, it's still the same satisfaction that they get but I do it on a grander scale, I guess. So we focused a lot on Triumph because we were doing so well in that market, but we never reached out to Triumph. I have had some dealings with other Triumph brands in the industry, we'll say, and it didn't have the best experience starting out, and I learned a lot.
Awesome, man. Thank you for answering that. I was really interested in how you did that.
All right, cool. So, Tony, tell us about some of the challenges that you faced, whether they're small business aspect or actual building aspect. What's some of the hardest things that you have to go through with what you do with your business and your building aspects?
Well, dealing with customers,
Right.
I'm a heads down work kind of guy and pretty black and white. So it's like my happy place is just working by myself constantly. Like it's just where I get most of my satisfaction from. So if you get a customer that's not happy with a part and complaining, or shipping drops the ball, or I got to find something that got misplaced in Spain, and I have to sit down for, like, it's not intuitive for me to do that stuff. And since I'm a one-man shop, I have to do that stuff.
Yeah.
So those are challenging parts. Like, it's dealing with having your stuff out in so many places it just comes with the territory. Like, if a part fails, I got to replace it, and we have great warranty. Like, we
That's
pretty much
awesome.
replace everything that we make. If it breaks easily within the first year. And if it's beyond that, we eat the cost of labor on, like, our big parts and just charge for parts. So we I am just busy constantly doing all of those things, and those are pretty challenging. During COVID, one of the biggest challenging parts was material. Like, just getting material to make the parts we make was a headache. And now it's so expensive. Like, everything has gone ridiculously expensive for materials. And, like, every time I order a bulk of the next thing, they're like, "Oh, our prices are up." I'm like, they went up last time. Like, come on, do they have to go up every time I order a part? And that's probably the most challenging now. Starting out though, it was all a challenge. I mean, I was working constantly, never a break. Like, when people say if you do what you love, you never have to work a day in your life, that is the most false statement that was ever said.
I think that's strictly for the motorcycle industry only. that
Well,
it's not true.
I think
It's
if you
not true.
do what you love and you don't own your business, then you are enjoying, you're not working a day in your life. But if you own a business, you're literally working every day.
Yeah, man, that must have been tough for you because you building your parts business after COVID, when it was like impossible to get materials and everything else, man. So I get it. Did you ever think about possibly even shutting that down because of the issues you were going
I've
through?
not thought about shutting it down. I have definitely contemplated selling the parts side if a buyer came along. And I've approached a couple of my wholesalers that, do pretty well with our parts, just to see if, they might bite, but nothing yet. I would love, because now that we relocated to Tennessee almost 4 years ago, and that was a challenge in and of itself to get all my stuff down here and set up. And I'm still kind of building out the shop, but I'm pretty close to where it's a functioning, flowing shop now, where I can get in, do a thing, knock it out, clean up, it's done. Whereas before, I was tripping over stuff and still have machines on pallets and, moving things around so that I can get a thing in. And it was difficult for the first few years, but now that I'm getting to the point where I've even taken on, like, smaller fabrication jobs just because I can get them in and out quick. So now that I'm here, established, shop's going well, I wouldn't mind getting rid of the parts business and then just focusing on the shop stuff. And it's more so just because of the time that it takes. Like, it takes a lot of time to make parts, order parts, ship parts, make sure I get more materials in for the next batch of parts. Or, it's just a constant. I come in here and work in the office more than I'd like every day. And, I've gotten a groove to this point, so I'm able to kind of keep it going and make it happen, and it still makes money. So it's like, I'm going to keep doing it
And that
'cause it's
must have
making
been a
money.
tough transition too, man, because you were at your old shop. You were in what, Illinois? So
Yeah.
you were there where you started your business. So you had all your contacts, all your guys, everything that you needed done, powder coating, all this, what you do when you do frame off restos. And now you're in this new place by yourself. So now you got to try to find the right guys who do the right things and they do it right. So your customers are happy and the worst. So that's challenging. So listen up, kids. Here's the lesson of the story, man. If you're going to do this, man, you better be prepared to work, because owning a small custom motorcycle shop is tough work. And you guys see the pictures in Cycle World and you see the pictures in on the internet of all this stuff done, but it really is. It's a grind, man, and it takes a lot of work, and you've got to have great people around you to make to make your business better. So what he does every day is, man, my hat's off to you. I've been in it and I get it. So keep up the amazing work that you're doing. Speaking of that, I wanted to ask you this. What exciting projects, calibrations, things of that nature, what are you working on now, bro?
So I actually have a current Ducati Hyper Motard build that I'm going to be finishing up soon. Customer just added a whole bunch of electrical work. He wants to rewire the whole thing, which we weren't planning on doing originally. So that's going to kind of take it up a notch for me, just because I get into that stuff. So that one, I've actually got three Ducatis coming in. So I have a Monster S2R 1000, the same bike I started monkeying around on. That one's coming in for a customer. That should be a pretty cool build. We're kind of filing the details right now before I tear it apart. And then I have another Ducati later this year that I'm not going to share any info on that one yet, because it's still up in the air, but it might be a pretty crazy build. And if I get carte blanche, sort of, design reins let go, and I get to do what I want, it could turn out pretty sweet.
That is awesome, man. What kind of time frames you giving these guys, or what kind of turnaround time frame are you normally working with when from the time the customer comes in, says, this is what I need done, this is what I want done? Are you basically doing like 6 months, 4 months? What are you working on as far as? And I hate giving times when you can't get certain parts. So I get it. What kind of turnaround you expect?
So depends a lot on the build, like how complex the build is, and if we already have a donor bike or if we're hunting for one. But usually, back in Illinois, when I had all of my trades that I had, my painter and powder coater, like when I had all that stuff sorted, it was a 3 to 4 month turnaround for most of what I was doing on our website. Bigger builds, obviously, I mean, a couple of them took over a couple of years, or just because there was a spec build that I was doing on my own time, just kind of when I could fit it in. But a customer build, now I tell them 4 to 6 months is pretty average, just because I'm running the parts business and I'm solo. Like I have to keep this thing going. So my shop time may not be, I'm not in there, 8 hours a day for 5 days a week. I'm in there, 4 hours here, 5 hours there, maybe 1 day a week full time. And maybe 1 day I'm not even there at all. Like it's harder to juggle with the parts business. But I like to, over deliver and under promise. So I try to keep the date out there a little bit, and I book about a year out for most of these now. And I usually have about 2 at least going at one time. But yeah, so the Hyper started end of last year. It was supposed to be done now, but then he added the electrical and the paint's not back yet. But the next one I would presume would be done by midsummer. And then the one I'm starting after that is in May, and that will probably be done towards the end of the year. So I just kind of stack them, out a little bit. And, I'm very transparent with my customers. I let them know where I'm at. I let them know, what's going on. I keep in contact with them, so they're not ever wondering like, you took all my money.
Right, right.
I haven't
Where's
heard
my
from him
money
in 6
going?
months."
What's going on?
Yeah, I mean, I send them updates, I send them pictures, I ask them questions occasionally, keep them involved. And, when I need a draw, it's like, all right, we're about to tear apart the bike and I need another draw. And I think I have a pretty good, communication with them
Awesome.
on that. So I'm able to keep it going.
Cool. Thanks.
Cool. So, what about the current industry today? What's your opinion on things? What are some things that you like and that you're not so crazy about?
That's a tough one. The OEMs now they're more trying to nod to customs, I feel like. So they're trying to put out custom models, which make it
Right.
kind of dumbs down, I guess, what a custom builder does. And I'm not a huge fan of that, but I get it. Like they're wanting some exclusivity and they can turn around, but when you look at them, they're like, yeah, you change some paint and put a couple parts on it. Like it's not really that custom. But to your typical, motorcyclist, they're like, I got the custom, Lamborghini edition Ducati, whatever. And I got the last RS Triumph Heritage,
Right.
and I get it. Like to some people, they could be worth some money because they're, limited
Right,
run
right.
or whatever. But to me, it's like, you're going to spend more money on that thing. Like buy something that's 5, 6, 10 years older and let's customize it and spend, about the same money. And then you literally have one of one, like that's a little more
That's right.
exclusive, but I get that that's not in everyone's wheelhouse either. And
Wow.
people like the satisfaction and the gratification of, I ordered it, it's coming Tuesday and I'm on it right then. Whereas, I'm looking out a year, like you're not going to see your bike for a year and a half. Like that's not everyone's into that either. So on the parts side,
Right.
it seems like the the overseas markets are really getting hip to what people are doing over here. And then they come out with copies of stuff really fast and really dumping into the market and undercut. And
You're talking about the China product garbage that
yeah,
they put out there?
yeah. And that's a challenge, to deal with. Thankfully, we've not had any head-to-head combat with any of that stuff with our parts, which is again why I say find something niche that's almost too difficult to replicate in order to keep your thing going without having to deal with that side of it. But I don't know. I don't really keep a pulse on the industry anymore. Like I used to go. I mean, like I said, I used to go to shows all the time. We used to hit up AIM Expo every year and the indie dealer show before that. And I used to like to go, used to like to rub elbows, see some people, keep going in it. And now that everything's kind of steady for me and I have builds booked out and I'm still getting inquiries and our parts are still selling, like I feel like I could ride this wave until it dries up and then I'm done. Like I'll never be done tinkering, but I feel like I'm established enough and I have a brand and brand has awareness and I still get, I still have all the things that I need to keep it going and I'm good with that. So I'm not really focused on what the industry is doing because it doesn't really affect me so much. But on the contrary, there is some legislation and that sort of thing that, I know people are battling and they're trying to make it so that we can still customize bikes because there are some people in the government that would like to shut that down too. So, I mean, I'm all for that. I don't follow it as much as maybe I should because it's not, again, not truly affecting me now. And so I just keep plugging along.
That's cool, man. We had Kirk Willard on the show. He's the president of MRF and which is Motorcycle Riders Foundation. So he fights in DC all the time. These bureaucrats who are constantly trying to get rid of the old bikes, bring in only electric, and to mandate when the motorcycle. It was an awesome story. Well, let me ask you this: who are some builders that you love and still pay attention to, or maybe inspired you, or that you still kind of follow? And who are some? Do you have you seen some new guys out there that you kind of like what they're doing and what they're bringing out on the market?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of inspiration out there. There's some very talented people out there doing things. Max Azan is probably, I mean, he's a great guy and just an eye for detail that not many people have. And I really, really dig what he does. They all look super uncomfortable and would never want to ride them very far, but he actually gets out and, rides his motorcycles on the streets of California.
How old is he? How old is he?
I would say he's probably about my age. He's in his mid 40s, I'm guessing.
Okay.
So,
Good man.
but I think he does some incredible work. Christian Sosa's a great dude. He was one of the
Christian Sosa,
metal shaping
yeah.
classes that I went to. And again, it's just super intricate detail, like what he does with steel and the amount of time and effort that he puts into just hand filing stuff is just crazy to me. Who else?
Cool.
There's a kid up in Canada, and I'm not remembering his name right now. He's also done some pretty incredible builds. Metal shaping, like same thing, kind of taught himself, and just really, really talented kid. So those are probably top three, I would say. And then, actually the Zillers in Russia, that guy,
All right, cool.
he does some pretty amazing stuff. Yeah. He did
Insane.
what
Yeah.
was that bike
All
that
right, I
he
gotta
did?
check him out.
I think it was a Black Shadow, that it was just incredible. Just so much detail in that. And then now he's doing a whole bunch of BMW builds that he came up with the design, and now he just manufactures, basically doing these same custom versions, different colors and stuff. But he's a pretty talented guy.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he's got a posse in Russia just putting out stuff constantly.
Just a
like
mad
they're just
scientist.
constantly working and putting out product.
The Canadian guy isn't Jay Donovan, is it?
It is Jay Donovan.
Wow.
Yeah. That's him. He's super talented kid.
So I'm curious now, the question everyone's wondering, what's in your garage, man?
Yeah.
You have.
Well, what's in the garage of an incredible bike builder?
So my daily is a KTM Duke 890R 2021. Bought that as soon as I got here, because back in Illinois, when I would want to go ride twisty roads, I had to go up to Wisconsin, and the ride was usually like an hour long on an interstate just to get to good roads. So I would always buy Super Dukes, or big bikes, or a Monster or Hyper Motard 1100, like anything. It had to be a leader just to get on the interstate and get somewhere. Got here, and I mean, Tennessee is, I drive out of my driveway and I got twisty roads for days. So I got a smaller bike and I love it. The KTM 890 is an amazing engine, amazing electric package. It's just such a fun bike. And then when my wife wants to go for a ride, she got her license while we were in Illinois and had her own bike for a while, but didn't really want to ride down here. She doesn't like twisty roads and deer. The deer thing I get, the twisty roads, I'm like, you are not a motorcyclist.
Right. Twisty roads of why we ride.
So I'm in a 2014 BMW R1200 RT, big old cruiser, sport cruiser that called a Bavarian spaceship. And that thing is, she loves hopping on the back of that, and we'll go ride around. Those are.
Do you get a chance to kind of enjoy and take off for a little while? Have you gone on any trips lately, or you just busy driving?
Last year we did. This year we don't have anything scheduled yet. When I first got it, it was September, or right before September, and we took it up to Wisconsin for a wedding. So we went from Tennessee to Wisconsin for cousin's wedding and back. That was her longest. I think that was the longest she'd ever ridden. This on our way back, we did like 515 miles one day.
Actually,
like,
did. Yeah.
It's like never again.
What were you get? Were you getting the taps? The taps? Can we pull over?
Sometimes. Yeah, we have intercom, so she'll chat with me. I got her a little out first.
Gotcha. See, I can't put the intercom with my wife because we talk all day long. So it's like, this is the only freedom I have is when I'm riding. Yeah. So just tap
Those
me.
little phone straps are pretty cool.
Yeah, she has like actually for like waterproof. It's like a waterproof one, so you can still touch it through the screen. She's at her phone all the time. Sat back there. She's got a backrest. just hanging out.
That's cool. Where can people find you, man? Give us all your website, your social media outlets. We'll post everything on the notes section of this podcast so they can just click directly to you. And if anybody's interested, maybe in looking into a parts business, as Tony has mentioned, he would consider possibly moving on from that. So if you guys want to reach out to him, check out the parts. Definitely worth looking into. But how can these guys reach out to you?
All of our stuff is Analog Motorcycles. So analogmotorcycles.com, Instagram at Analog Motorcycles. Parts line is at Analog Motor Goods. They're actually two separate companies. The builds are all on motorcycles.com. We got Facebook for both of them, YouTube for both of them. So,
all right. Awesome, man. All right. I hope you're buckled in, man, because we got a speed round section coming up next. So we're going to get a chance to get to know you on a funny level. So let's do this. We got 15 questions. Ben will rip them out. No right or wrong answer. If you don't answer in 2 minutes, then you have to build Ben and I both a motorcycle on the house. So you got to move along.
all right.
All right, first one's, what's the best motorcycle you've ever ridden or owned?
I'd say the KTM 890 Duke R.
If your motorcycle could talk, what would it say about you?
Slow down.
Nice. Best place you've ever ridden and why?
Shoot, I've ridden all over this country. One of my favorite roads in the nation, though, is the Cherahalla Skyway, which is south of the Tail of the Dragon. So it's an amazing road, very little cross traffic, very little traffic, lots of elevation change, big sweepers. That one definitely is on the top 5 list for sure.
What's the most embarrassing song on your playlist?
Probably something from Sia.
Okay, that surprised me. If you could time travel, what era would it be to and why?
Probably 60s, just because it was simpler, but yet there was some technology coming out that, was helping things, but I like simple.
That's cool. Favorite motorcycle movie of all time?
Ooh, boy. I don't know. I have this Hadaka documentary that's pretty classic. That is pretty fun to watch, but I don't know that I have a favorite motorcycle movie.
Who was your movie crush growing up?
I don't know that I have one. I was Saved by the Bell era, so maybe Kelly.
Ellie. Nice.
Is that the blonde one?
No, the brunette.
That's
The brunette? Okay. I don't even know if I've ever watched that. You
classic.
guys are still young, man. I guess I'm old. I don't know. I'm like, damn. All right.
Oh, right. You'll see by the If you could meet and have dinner with one person, past or present,
Jesus.
Answer.
one law you would change if you were president to impact or help the motorcycle.
Inspections.
No inspections?
Yeah, no inspections. Tennessee's not an inspection state, but I know I deal
Florida
with
either.
some customers deal with it and seems like a pain in the butt.
What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Well, this might be a long story.
Go
So,
for it. We'll do a timeout.
No. Pick like
Yeah.
I want to bill.
so I went to the Indy Motorcycle Expo, the dealer expo, when I was first starting out. I had the bobber that you had in your screenshot or in your background before. I had that there, and I had an SR 500 that I just built. And I was standing there, trying to schmooze with the crowd or whatever. And this guy came up to me. He's like, you built this? I was like, yeah. It's pretty cool. He's like, would you sell it? And I was like, probably. He's like, what would you sell it for? And I told him a price, and he's like, is that what it's worth?
Right.
I'm like, well, man, I have more into it than that, but that's what I think is a possible fair value, kind of thinking that maybe he was interested. So like, why don't you sell it for what you're asking? I was like, because I don't think I'd get it. He's like, so if you did more, he kept going on the story. He's like, so if you did this level of build more frequently, and you have the time off because you weren't selling them at, you weren't dumping them basically. So if you're just building for a wage and you're not making any profit, or you're not getting what the value is, he said, you're just constantly working. He's like, but if you ask what you want for this thing and you get it, and so say you only do, instead of doing 6 builds a year, you're only doing 3 builds a year, but you're getting more for each of those 3, that frees up a ton of time to work on your business. And I was starting the parts at the time. I'm like, oh, that totally makes sense. Then I ended up getting a whole lot more pickier with the customers that I was taking on. I wasn't just taking on every build that I could possibly get my hands on. I started to be like, no, I'm probably not gonna make enough money on that one, so I'm gonna pass. You know, like it totally changed my game forever going forward.
Really? Wow.
Like I had to be another builder. Man,
I forgot his name, but he was Evel Knievel's painter.
oh, cool.
So he had a bunch of artwork there that he had painted,
Right.
and he dealt with the same thing where he was painting these giant paintings, or these time-consuming paintings, and dumping them because he needed money. And instead of actually charging what they're worth and waiting for that buyer to come, and he did the same thing. He worked on his business and ended up selling more.
Here's a good one for you. You said you were in a band. If you could get up and sing or jam with one band?
So I wasn't in a band, and I don't know how to play anything. No,
I thought you said you were in a band.
I worked for a band for 4 years, and I understand music more than a lot of musicians do, because I had a recording studio and the garage that I ended up turning into my shop when I first started, and I worked recording studio. But if I could play or jam, I would probably be a bass or drum player, and probably clutch.
It's classic. Slapping a bass. Cool. All right. What is one piece of clothing you own and love, but your spouse might not have the same sentiment?
I wear gray jeans all the time. Gray jeans and black t-shirts all the time. She's like, it's your outfit, but can you wear something different?
All right. If they made a biker themed movie about you, who would play Tony?
Oh boy,
Let's go with Sam Elliott.
I have no idea.
That's a good
Who's the
one.
most dry person that you can think of? Or actually, I should go the opposite. All right.
All right. What's a funny superstition you follow before or after a ride?
None. I'm not superstitious at all.
Right on. Fair. Okay, so besides the One Gang Worldwide podcast, obviously, what's your favorite podcast or podcasts?
I am a big fan of Dusty Slay. He's a comedian here in Tennessee, and he has one called Having a Good Time. So it's the Having a Good Time podcast, and
Right, cool,
it's him
man.
and his wife,
Well, you made it,
and
man.
it's pretty funny.
159 on the clock, dude. You did it. So no builds for Ben and I on the house. That kind of sucks, but hey, man, Toad, thanks, brother. Thanks for coming on, sharing your story with us. It's great to see the trials, tribulations of a small business and the things that you go through on a daily basis. It's good for people to see not just the final products, but the things that you got to go through every day, to keep the doors open, keep the lights on. So we're definitely huge fans of yours, man. And love to have you back on sometime, maybe after your project, a couple of your Ducatis are done. So we can talk a little bit about the things that went into that. So just keep up the amazing work. And we love what you're doing, brother. All right. Keep going, and don't let anybody get in the way, man.
Thanks for sharing with us, man.
Sounds good. Thank you, guys.
All right, buddy. Be good.
Have a good one, man.